Hello guys and welcome back, and today I want to talk about Synology 2020 again, but this time we're talking about the event itself. It took place in Taipei last night, this morning. The time differences are all over the place and a whole bunch of stuff was revealed to us. Now once again, just to recap, I'm going to be covering all of the Synology event as much as possible over the next month or so, but this of course is the big first one. Now, this is going to be a very brief video. I say brief, it's probably going to knock in at about 10 to 15 minutes at the very least anyway. But the reason I'm doing that is I'm going to be doing a very brief overview of everything in their keynote speeches, and then after this there's going to be lots of smaller videos where I'm going to focus on all those different elements throughout the next few days. That's because to do all of this in one giant video is a nightmare. But that said, if you do want to watch the entire Taiwanese event, the entire speech, they did live stream the whole thing, so do check out their Facebook page where they broadcast the entire keynote, opening speech, middle and end for you. But this is a summary of that along with some other stuff that was going on at the event. So once again, this may skip over some of the details for the sake of brevity, but I will be covering this in the next day or two, and in Germany and in the UK and in a bunch of other regions as time wears on. But let's get straight into it. So Synology, we're covering the fact that it's almost their 20-year anniversary. I think next year is going to be the 20-year anniversary officially. I have to double check that. The head honcho there at Synology gave a big speech, which is fantastic. Hopefully here on the screen there'll be some takes from that live stream that I've just sort of edited and put on there, and Synology, thank you very much. On top of that, throughout this whole thing, they talked more about software than hardware, as you would expect from Synology, and of course DSM 7 was a big bit. Once again, if you do want to go through this in a more wordy form, or the fact that I'm talking to you with so much energy because all I've had is coffee and none of my sodding breakfast, then chances are it's probably best to go to the NAS Compare article in the description, which is what I'm going to be using today for this video, because this has got all of my highlights that I took from that and what I've been covering for the last 5 or 6 hours on nothing but coffee and adrenaline. So DSM 7, of course, which we saw last year at their last presentation when they gave us a very sneak peek, is significantly faster in its user interface. Not only is it cleaner, they've removed that top bar, but on top of that, it is a great deal smoother and faster to run. They did a couple of demonstrations of typically logging in and the speed of opening different apps and menus. It is noticeably faster, even on the same hardware running DSM 6.2. On top of that, they were talking more and more in this presentation about both SSD caching improvements, the storage manager improvements, and a huge overhaul of things like resource monitor. There was some other stuff with cloud that I'll talk about later. And again, I'm sorry if I'm going to talk fast during this video, but I just recommend strongly that if you need this in a more digestible form, go to the NAS Compare article or catch up on some of the videos I'm going to be following this with, where I focus on each of these subjects individually in more detail. So, with DSM's greater improvements, one of the biggest things they were sort of targeting during this presentation was the fact they're trying to give the user as much control as possible without making things too complex. That's always kind of been Synology's big rhetoric, and DSM 7.0 takes that further. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about is that resource monitor. If you have ever used a resource monitor on Synology's DSM platform, you'll know that it does give you a lot of information, but it's a little simplistic. It's one of my biggest complaints I've always had about it and a few of the other analytical things that Synology provide in their user interface. Resource Monitor has been improved now, so you can really dip into it in a greater detail with regards to the spikes of when you see activity or inactivity, and analyze them and find out what's going wrong in far greater detail without making things too complex. And again, there'll be a lot more focus on that in the German Expo very soon. On top of that, there was a lot of focus on the storage manager. Storage managers being overhauled in a few ways. First and foremost, it's being presented in a far more breadcrumb and hierarchical fashion, with a sidebar on the left there giving more information about individual storage pools, and it's kind of in a way borrowing some of the ease of a file manager but presenting it in the storage manager, because I know a number of people get those two things mixed up quite a lot. Within that, you've got a greater degree of user interface and ease of just looking at the layout, and you can also open additional tabs within the window that you can find out more information. So it lets you give yourself as much information as you're prepared to assimilate, which is quite nice. And that's, I believe, how they maintain that standard there of giving as much information as you need, but not too much that it will frankly piss you off. So on top of that, they've also largely overhauled a lot of the SSD system. They're introducing new concepts and design into their SSD caching system, because they've noticed not only alongside a lot of their NASs providing SSD caching bays, but on top of that, people utilizing that SSD cache is greater than even they would have hoped. So on top of that, they've really re-examined a lot of that SSD caching system and introducing new factors. Now, on top, if we go through those, there's different ones that they are incorporating into that system of pinning metadata and locking metadata, and there's also stuff about inline data compression. All three of those concepts we're going to say for the next video, but effectively what they mean is ensuring that the most important cache data isn't flushed. It doesn't just treat, that file's not been touched for X amount of time, flush it. It's a much better way to understand the cache data, and that, along with the 64 kilobit block system, is going to really change things up for them. And as their demonstrations proved, or let's go by what they showed us, that the read and writes were vastly improved compared with a traditional hard drive storage array. Traditional hard drive storage array with the existing system SSD cache and DSM-7's SSD cache system and a hard drive array. But we'll learn more about that when DSM's released. Moving away from that, we're going to talk, do you know what, let's go into some more software stuff. There's some hardware at the end of the video, skip forward if that's what you want to care about. But the stuff I'm going to talk about next is their system of Synology C2 implementation. Now, Synology C2 is their cloud platform that's been around for quite a while. It's in its most simple form, it is an area of online, cloud storage provided by Synology on their server farms that lets you have an off-site backup of your data. Now, lots of people have been using that. I think they listed it in the tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people that have already started implementing this into their data structure, and now they're taking it one step further because they saw the demand. They saw how well this this system of pinning files and having file on demand streaming, and they're implementing a not dissimilar system between your NAS and Synology C2 platform. What it means is that they've improved the user interface of what you can see of that data. So if you go within their new system known as Hybrid Share will give you a lovely graphical user interface that lets you see the storage on your cloud as a mounted drive. You can then pin files, you can then choose file on demand. You have a greater degree of control, and if you've got multiple Synologies in your user environment all clouding together into that one area, Hybrid Share will also enable kind of a smarter sharing system of that data in terms of file streaming on demand, and again that pinning system. That's not what they called it because those concepts are more about drive, but within Hybrid Share you have a greater degree of control of the files that are shared between live anyway between the C2 platform and your NAS, and then you've got your NAS and your client PC or Mac machine with drive in the middle. Now, talking of drive, good news for you Mac guys out there, and I know I've talked about this on the channel, but let's talk about it again. Synology are working now to get drive to support those file on demands and file streaming via their client application. So for all of you Mac users that use Finder to access your NAS with the Synology Drive client, who have been, I'm not going to say jealous, but I'm going to say disappointed with the fact that you couldn't take advantage of that file pinning and on-demand file streaming system that Windows users have got thanks to Synology's collaboration with Microsoft. Good news is it is coming to Mac. It's coming to Finder. You will have those Drive client utilities open to you. So once again, you've got your client machine that's going to be using Drive, whether you've got a PC or a Mac, to synchronize with your NAS in as customizable fashion as you want, and then you've got Hybrid Share that lets you synchronize between your NAS and that C2 cloud platform. And I'm hoping I'm working with Synology UK a little bit on this to get a full overview of Synology's C2 platform out there for you guys, because I know it's a bit of a step to move your data onto a cloud platform. So hopefully we can get that overview out very, very soon. Now, Moving forward from that, we can talk about another amalgamation of platforms. We can talk about Synology Photos. Now, Synology Photos is something they show where essentially, you know, Synology Photo Station, that's a great cataloging tool and a good way of displaying albums and slideshows and stuff. And then you had Synology Moment, which was a photo AI powered recognition tool and search tool for your photos. What they're doing is taking both of these softwares and boom, they're putting them together for Synology Photos. Synology Photos promises to have all of the functionality of both of these applications and a few extra ones, such as folder management, which is, for me, something that's long overdue, and a smart filtering system. And again, I'm going to do a whole dedicated video on Synology Photos, so I'm not going to go on about it too much here. But for me, that was one of the standout moments. I really, really like that. That and the Mac client Drive application being, including those pinning features was real interesting to me. Where are we at? Well, I think we're almost we must be at the 10-minute mark by now. Now, let's talk about hardware. We're going to dip into hardware and come a little bit back to software. There were some NASs available on show, and this isn't all of them, by the way. I'm only going to touch on a few. I'm going to talk about one little home one for you guys, namely the Synology DS420J. Now, the 420J is, of course, follow-up to the DS418J, and it is an ARM dual-core powered 4-bay NAS. It's going to have the usual things you would expect from a NAS of this caliber, but right now I'm not going to talk too much about the hardware here. One, because thanks to a fantastic translation tool, I'm not convinced by that CPU yet, and two, I'm unsure about the memory capability. So rather than get it wrong here, I'm just going to save that for the dedicated video. Next, on top of that 4-bay, there was an active-passive rack mount that is an alternative to that UC3200 that we're still waiting release of. It is the SA3200D. This is a 12-bay SAS-enabled dual controller NAS. And again, lots more information in the dedicated video coming up. But what I will tell you is it has got this, I can confirm, it's got Intel Xeon D CPU 1521, and that's a quad-core processor, and it arrives with 8 gig of DDR4 memory. And remember, dual controller means a nice little system there of hardware, but because it's active-passive, it'll be interesting to see what they do with that CPU, whether they double up or not, because active-passive is not the same as active-active. When you've got the two of them working together, you can have a drop-off system there. So again, check out the dedicated video to learn more about that device. Another new NAS, this one, hold on to your hats. It's a 60-bay, that's 60. I mean, I needed my cereal. I don't care if I'm going to keep putting no cereal. I am hungry. But a 60-bay 4U rack mount. It's a top-loaded rack mount device, this 4U. And this thing is just insane. It uses Intel Silver 41110 CPUs. Those are Xeon 8-core processors. And it supports up to a staggering 512 gigabytes of DDR4 ECC memory and arrives with 32 gig. That's monstrous. And I believe that it's dual. It's two of those CPUs inside as well. So hold on to your hats. That's crazy town. And again, we've got a few photos of that chassis. It's monstrous. It has like a ventilated front panel. There are no bays on the front because it's all top loaded. And do check out the dedicated video on that. But there should be the graphic from the show on the screen there. Now, there are lots of other things I've not even talked about in this video because I don't have enough information to discuss them in detail right now. And also because I'm going to be finding out more about them in the next day or so. And in the German launch event, which me and Eddie the Web Guy will be at. But other features to touch on will be Synology's directory server, a renaming of active server, and this is the ability to import and a better control of importing of those Windows Server operations. If you want to import them onto a NAS, this is a greater and more improved way to carry your Windows Server hardware software setups on another device onto a Synology NAS. On top of that, there is a greater improvement and collaboration between vSphere, that's VMware environments, that want to take advantage of those platforms with all of their files living on the NAS, but want to utilize VMware vSphere's user interface, that dashboard. They've got vast improvements in the collaboration between those platforms that mean you can carry on using the vSphere dashboard, but greater control of those VMs on your Synology NAS. On top of that, we can talk about the resource monitor in a little bit more detail, because they had a lot more sort of situational awareness stuff there and showing you a few examples of it being utilized. The inline data compression we've already touched about. With the SSD cache on top of that, the innovations that are happening in the way they implement SSD cache. There is also an improved cache advisory board or cache advisor that allows you to get the system to see how your system needs the SSD cache. It won't just look at the number of hard drives and go, you need about 2 terabytes. It will go into far more detail about the types of data and the way you use that data to advise you the type of the cache and the assimilation of that cache and the RAID level it will use. And of course, thanks to that pinning of data, the pinning of metadata and locked metadata, it can only improve things that much more. I mean, I talk about the resource monitor there. It's also worth mentioning that the resource monitor is going to have a greater support for troubleshooting as well, with again, situational awareness, which allows you to, if you're worried there's a problem with one of the hard drives, or set it to semi-autonomous, you can allow it to do historical data checks against other drives in the set RAID and historical data to see if there's a problem. Now, this isn't the same as the predictive failure system that we saw mentioned for DSM-7 last year. This is different, but it's a very interesting feature nevertheless. ActiveSite is this system of monitoring the resources via your Synology account of any one or more NASs in your environment. It involves pinging all the real-time information from your NAS or NAS is to the Synology server and presenting it to you as a user interface, so you can have real-time information about all the NASs in your own storage environment, whether it's one or more, and then you can action commands and control of all of those devices. Now, on top of that, with the greater improvements towards the Synology account and the amount of control you have of your NAS via that account, they've really improved a bunch of stuff there too. So with Synology account, you can actually back up now the entire system, the entire NAS configuration, not the storage so much as the configuration, all the settings, all the options, all the passwords, all the accounts, basically all the back end to your Synology account now, so which is going to be really, really handy for those that want to roll back or install new NASs or want to duplicate settings across multiple NASs and multiple setups. And that control of the Synology account goes a lot further as well, because now they're changing a lot of DSM-7's control of the hardware assets. And because the Synology account is being given greater privilege, Synology account being your login via the internet to a NAS user interface, because they're giving you that amount of control, they've changed the way, for example, if you have an expansion device. And with that expansion device, you've got another whole RAID separate, so not spread across, you've got another RAID separate. From here, you can then decide via the external access to go disconnect that storage pool and connect a new one without it kicking you out of the system or stopping you having access to the storage and therefore kicking you out. Same thing goes with the SSD cache. You can modify, remove or add SSD cache remotely to an existing hard drive array without being kicked off remotely, because a lot of the time these changes have to be made on the fly, and if you're on the fly, almost certainly you're not going to be in the same area as your NAS. You could be anywhere in the world for business or for pleasure. So changes like this are very, very important indeed. But again, there is even more stuff I've not spoke about in this video, but I'm very aware that I've got to be coming close to the 20-minute mark right now. So I'm going to wrap things up. Hopefully there has been videos throughout this. But again, for more information about the things I've spoke about, go to the overview from NAS Compares below of the Taiwanese launch event. It's still not all the information, because a lot of that is still being put together for future articles and videos, but it's even more information than I've talked about in this video, and I strongly recommend that you click like and subscribe and click the bell for notifications, because I will be covering even more information and probably more hardware as well in Germany on Tuesday. So see you then. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. Bung your comments and questions below, and I'll see you next time.